Hey guys, today I want to talk about the books that I read in February. February was kind of a slow reading month for me. I started reading 2 books and I DNF'd them, and then I moved on to 2 other books. So I really only read 2, but I still want to talk about the 2 books that I did not finish. The first one being The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. This is the story of the Chicago World Fair in 1893, and it talks about the architects that actually built the World Fair, and then it also talks about a serial killer, H.H. Holmes, who used the World Fair and how popular it was and how it drew so many young people and millions of people all over the world. He used that to kind of lure victims to this hotel that he built. He built this hotel with like secret compartments and traps and torture chambers and all that stuff. And he mainly targeted young women who were moving to Chicago because it was the new place to be, and they wanted better opportunities for themselves. And so he lured these young women to his hotel and he killed them. And really, this book is not badly written. It's very well researched. The actual World's Fair is very interesting to know about, kind of the behind the scenes of how it was built and came about. My main issue was that I did not really want to read about the play by play, really minute details of building this fair. I really wanted to hear and read about Holmes. And so I found myself only reading the parts about Holmes, and I found him to be a very interesting character. You could tell that Erik Larson tried to use a lot of research and documents that we know of about Holmes to build this story, but then he also kind of added his own little spin into, the mind of Holmes. And so those parts were interesting to me, and that's why I marked this as a did not finish, because really I read maybe half of it. The other half was about, like I said, the architects and, the planning and building of the fair, which was interesting at first, but it was just too much detail, too much information that really could have been summed up into maybe one good chapter on how the fair came to be. But I think he probably got too invested in trying to give us the whole picture. And as a reader, I just didn't care about that whole picture about the fair being built. I really just wanted to know about Holmes and, the devil in the White City. I wanted to hear about him. And so that's why I marked this one as did not finish. The other one that I started but did not finish was Someone Knows My Name by Lawrence Hill. And this was a book that I chose for Black History Month or Read So Lit. I wanted to read a book by a author of color. And so I picked this one up because I had heard about it, and it seemed like it had good reviews and all that stuff. But reading this book made me realize that I do not want to read another slave narrative, slave story, because then this is just my personal opinion, but I believe that there are so many stories out there written by Black authors about Black characters that don't have to always be a slave narrative. There's so many other things that can be talked about, so many other instances where you could put a Black character, Black family, or just, a character of color into different, different plot scenarios, stories. And the reason that I just can't do another slave narrative is because I feel like it's just become this kind of trope. I mean, it's obviously a very important point of history, and it's not one that needs to be erased or forgotten about, but I feel like there's so many more books that I could be reading from Black authors. And so that's why I did not finish this. I'll probably read this at some point. It's not like I'm never going to read another book about this whole time in history, but I just feel like I've read several already, and I feel like I need to change focus because, like I've said like 5 times now, there's so much more stories that I could be reading. by Black authors. So that's why I didn't finish this one. I'll still have it on my shelf in case I change my mind and decide to just read it at some point. But what I picked up instead was Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I will have a picture here because I checked it out from the library, an ebook version. And I am so happy that I did. This was a book that was published in 2015, I think late 2015, and was read widely here on BookTube all throughout 2016. And it's been on my radar since then, and I've been wanting to read it and wanting to pick it up. But I think the hype kind of made me back up a little bit. And also, hearing the news, reading the news, and knowing about what's going on, it's been difficult just as a citizen to see what's been happening. And you know, it's almost like reading a book like this would be too close for home, and I'm not even Black, so I can just imagine how the Black community is feeling here in the States. And you know, my heart breaks for them, and you know, you kind of feel helpless, and like, you know, yes, we're here to listen and understand, but you know, how do we help? And anyway, I think that one of the ways to start really being open to, you know, what's happening, and understanding truly what's happening, is to read books like this. So this is basically a letter written by the author to his son. His son is 15, and it's just a long letter explaining about the author's upbringing in Baltimore, what it means to be a Black man in the United States, what it means to live in fear every day, what that fear does to you as a person, and then later to you as a parent, the state of relations between whites and Blacks in the United States. It kind of has a lot in it, and it's written in a very no bullshit tone. Ta-Nehisi Coates is not playing around with this letter. It's very honest, and I really felt almost like I was intruding in a conversation or overhearing a conversation that really I have no place in. But that's probably why it had such an impact on, you know, the literary world, and why so many people love it. I personally loved it. I finished it, and I felt like I had been punched with just not reality, but with this type of reality. Like, there's obviously, you know, you read the news and you hear about what's been going on. And as a person who, even though I am Latina, I am white, I don't go to a store kind of looking behind me, seeing that someone's following me when I'm shopping. I don't fear, you know, when I am stopped by a policeman. Not this type of fear. And so you really don't understand unless you are in that person's shoes. And that's why I think this book is so important and such a must read, is that, you know, we will never as white people understand what it's like, and we will never live that life. But this type of book will help us kind of get into that mindset of where Black people are coming from in this movement, in this whole situation that's happening. And it will give us a glimpse into racism that otherwise we wouldn't. I mean, yes, we can read about racism and we can understand that it's a systemic oppression and all that, you know, all that information that we can just read for ourselves. But there's a difference, obviously, and this is where privilege comes in, where you can read and understand what racism is, and then there's this other side where people are living it every day. That's what this book was for me. It was very raw, poetic, beautifully written. Every sentence carries this punch. It's just, he's a talented writer, but also just the idea of a letter having to be even written. Just the idea of his son having to understand this world, this divide, you know, it's painful to have that realization, to have to live in this type of world, you know. Anyway, before I could talk about this book for hours, but I'm not. I'm just gonna say that it's a must read. Definitely check it out. It's as good as everybody says, and it will make you uncomfortable. It will be painful to read about. It will give you a better glimpse of what it's like to be Black and have to live in the United States at this moment in time. So I think that's a very important thing to know. And I think that it's, like I said, it's a very different experience to just read about something and have that distance and then read a book like this and be forced to be in this world. So yeah, read it. And then the other book that I read was The Vegetarian by Han Kang. This was another book that was hyped up here on BookTube. I bought this when I was on my trip to New York with the girls, and I love this cover. I love the idea of the story being set in South Korea, and the whole premise of this book just seems so interesting and something that I really wanted to read about. This is about a woman who has a very bad dream, very vivid, violent dream, and she decides to stop eating meat. And because she stops eating meat, her marriage kind of suffers, her family relationships suffer, because people don't understand where she's coming from. She kind of takes it in a very extreme way. And then the book kind of switches perspective. It's like another narrative that we're reading, and it's from the perspective of the main character's sister's husband and his obsession with her. He's an artist, and he views her and her kind of protest as something that, I don't know, interests him. She interests him, and it seems like he sees her in a way that nobody else does. And then the last perspective is her sister's perspective. The main character is, I guess I shouldn't say it because I don't want to spoil it, but a situation happens with the main character where the sister is involved, and that's kind of how the book ends, with the sisters being together, and still after reading all of these different perspectives, and still after realizing the childhood that the main character went through and seeing her through different eyes, I still don't understand what the hell is the point of this book. And I've read different reviews and analysis, and try to see like what are people getting out of this book, because to me it was so disjointed, purposefully vague, and just not clear at times. Some parts are written beautifully, and then other parts I'm like, what was the point of that? That added nothing to the story. There is no sense of finality when you finish this book. There's no sense of conclusion or wrapping up anything, or a resolution. There's just nothing to this book other than, you know, maybe seeing the side of what, you know, a mentally ill person or someone with a very troubled past, how that can carry over as an adult, and how that can literally change your perspective. That's the only thing that I could really get out of this book. In the end, I found it, I don't know, I just did not get it. I did not, and even if someone were to sit down and tell me, well, this is why, you know, it's this way, this is why the dream matters as much as it does, this is why, you know, her relationships fall apart, and why towards the end, she's in control, and like all these other things are just like, I'm not interested. I just don't care. I feel like I was duped, and because of that, it's kind of made me a little closed off to, you know, the secret behind this book. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because I will not be rereading this to find out anything else about it. I can see the appeal, and I can see why it won the Man Booker Prize. It's definitely out there. I don't think I've read anything like this, and I really do respect Han Kang for kind of breaking the mold, and writing something as crazy as this. But I don't know. I might check out her other book. I think it's called Human Acts, because I do think she is a talented writer. I just did not like the plot, the characters, or anything about this story. But that doesn't mean that she hasn't done something different with Human Acts. So I might check that out, but I probably will do like a library check out and not actually spend money on it. So Those are my thoughts on The Vegetarian. I wouldn't say don't read it. It's so short that you might as well give it a shot and see if it's for you. I just know that for me it wasn't, and that's okay. Sometimes that's gonna happen. So those are the books that I read in February. And March, I have kind of a big project going on with Don Quixote. I'm reading that. I'm reading 30 pages a day. But because I'm reading 30 pages a day, I kind of did that on purpose to kind of allow me to read some other things as well, maybe 30 pages of another book. So I have a few books that I checked out from the library that I'm going to be giving a try, as well as The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I started that one, and then I started Don Quixote and kind of like got wrapped up in that. So those are kind of the books that I'm going to be focusing on in March, and hopefully I read more than 2. That's the goal. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please let me know down in the comments what you read in February, if anything stood out to you, if there are any recommendations that you have for me. I'd love to hear about it. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!